Hello and most welcome to 1765 of the Heidegger series. We have today the pleasure to start a new article by Meredith J.C. Warren, Tasting the Little Scroll, a sensory analysis of divine interaction in Revelation. Pen 8 to 10. Abstract, the ingestion of the scroll in Revelation 10:8 to 10 is a key element of how John experiences God's revelation and transmits it to others. Using sensory analysis, I propose that the scroll's ingestion represents a shared understanding of how the consumption of otherworldly food in narrative grants access to the divine realm and thereby transmits divine knowledge. The privacy of taste, as opposed to the shared senses of sight and hearing, suggests that participants in this kind of eating experience God in the most intimate way. The special way that John accesses these divine revelations through consuming the little scroll shows that he is granted privileged access to God's knowledge, which, when translated into visions, allows others to participate in this intimacy. Introduction. The book of Revelation contains many curious scenes in which the seer, John of Patmos, receives divine revelations in a scene towards the middle of the text. an angel presents John of Patmos with an unrolled scroll and directs him to eat it. And I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He held a little scroll open in his hand, setting his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. He gave a great shout like a lion roaring. And when he shouted, the seven thunders voiced. And when the seven thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up what the seven thunders have said, and do not write it down. Then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. Who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it. There will be no more delay. But in the days when the seventh angel is to blow his trumpet, the mystery of God will be fulfilled, as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, "Go take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, "Take it and eat it. It will be bitter to your stomach, but sweet as honey in your mouth." So I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. It was sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach was bitter. Then they said to me, "You must prophesy again about many peoples and nations and languages and kings." In a text rich with somatic imagery, the language of taste in this episode is a rhetorical tool and expresses a specific movement or meaning. I argue that the author uses the image of ingesting a scroll to communicate the legitimacy of John's revelatory experiences. And indeed, the authority of the book of Revelation as a whole. This analysis will shed light on the role of taste in the transmission of divine knowledge, as well as the specific ramification of ingesting sweet and bitter tasting substances. This short episode in Revelation 10, 8 and 10 has received less scholarly attention than many other aspects of this complex apocalypse. Scholars seem not to have considered how strange it is for John to eat a heavenly scroll. Comparing Revelation with two texts in which similar ingestion takes place, I argue that Revelation 10:8 to 10 makes use of a common trope I call hierophagy, the eating of otherworldly things, in which the eater undergoes a change that renders him or her uniquely capable of understanding divine knowledge as a result of the eating. This category of eating can be called a literary trope, in that it is a recurring pattern of language that expresses both shared and particular meanings across numerous ancient texts. Hierophagy or phage or phagy, I suggest, is a part of the literary toolbox used by ancient authors to transmit a certain understanding of the relationship between God and mortals, heaven and earth. Ancient pagan, Jewish and Christian texts presents hierophagy as a mechanism by which characters within narratives gain access to the divine realm by consuming some otherworldly item. Certain patterns emerge in terms of what kinds of things are consumed, but the item is not always food. While some examples of the trope involve items edible under ordinary circumstances, the Book of Revelation portrays its protagonist ingesting a scroll, an ingredient that does not figure prominently, if at all, in the recipe books of antiquity. Indeed, Revelation's use of a non-food item highlights that it is an act of ingesting the otherworldly item and not the nature of the item itself that is a core element of hierophagy in general. The act of eating a divine substance precipitates a change in John that brings him closer to the heavenly realm. In some comparable cases, such as Joseph and Asenath and Apuleius' metamorphosis, one function of eating otherworldly food is the transformation of the consumer's physical appearance. Asenath emerges from her hierophagic experience with a radiant beauty that renders her unrecognizable to her foster father, and Lucius is no longer an ass, but a human. Hierophagy can also function to translocate the eater to another realm, as we see when Ezra is taken up into the heaven for Ezra. And when Persephone is unable to return from the underworld in Ovid. In Revelation, however, the emphasis is placed on how hierophagy transmits divine knowledge from the one who provides the heavenly substance, the angel, to the one who eats the substance, John. I employ two intersecting approaches in reading Revelation 10. The first is reading the Apocalypse through the lens of ingestion, the physiological and metaphorical process of internalizing an object into the body. As Maggie Kilgore has demonstrated, the lens of ingestion exposes the metaphor of opposition between what is inside the body and what is outside of it. An opposition that itself dissolves as soon as the external object is made internal to the body. In other words, ingestion transforms a foreign object into a component of the body of the one who has ingested it. In terms of revelation, this lens illuminates how the relationship between the divine realm and the mortal realm is transformed through the eating of the scroll. The divine realm is made internal to John so that it is no longer external or alien. The second approach is sensory analysis. Sensory analysis has become an increasingly prominent methodological tool, especially in fields such as anthropology, where scholars such as David Howes have recognized the importance of non-visual, non-oral sensory experience in Western and non-Western cultures alike. In antiquity, sensory analysis is still in the process of gaining more mainstream scholarly attention. With several recent publications combining a literary analysis with anthropological sensory analysis showcases the literary techniques by which the author expresses meaning. Sensory and somatic imagery is woven into Revelation's message in a way that makes it impossible to understand the text without investigating the historical and rhetorical meaning behind the imagery. In contrast with visual and auditory experiences, the sense of taste is experienced privately. The translation of John's taste experience of the scroll in 10:8 to 10 into his visions, written down to be heard by an audience, allows a community to partake collectively in the sharing of this intimacy with the divine. I suggest that the special way that John accesses these divine revelations through consuming the little scroll shows that he is granted privileged access to God's knowledge, which, when translated into visions, allows others to participate in this intimacy. To establish a hierophagic pattern in Revelation, I will first analyze the text itself and outline the scene's relationship to other parts of the book of Revelation. Secondly, I will explore how the consumption of otherworldly food works to dissolve the boundaries between this world and the heavenly realm. Thirdly, I will examine how the sense of taste functions in antiquity in order to shed light on how it is used in Revelation. Finally, I will point out the ramifications of my findings for the book of Revelation. The scroll in Revelation 5. My argument about the consumption of the little scroll in chapter 10 supports the current consensus that the recommissioning of 10:11, where John is told to prophesy again, demarcates a new section of the entire book of Revelation. Many scholars agree that this recommissioning hinges on this episode of the little scroll. The ingestion of the little scroll marks a shift in the content of the book as a whole. The rhetorical force of John consuming the scroll in chapter 10 is highlighted by the inclusion of a scroll earlier in the text. The scroll in Revelation 5 does not express the same somatic connotations that the scroll in Revelation 10 does, and as such emphasizes the significance of ingesting the scroll as opposed to simply viewing it. In Revelation 5:2-3, we read, "And I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within, and on the back sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I wept much that no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. The scroll is opened by the Lamb, Jesus, and the opening of each of the 7 seals sets off a series of visions of calamity for earth. Scholars debate whether the scroll in Revelation 5:1 is the same as that in chapter 10. For my present argument, whether or not the scrolls are identical has little impact, although I tend to the view that they are the same, and I treat them as such in this article. Regardless, even if they are different scrolls, comparing them still emphasizes the significance of eating as opposed to merely viewing a scroll. Whereas if they are the same scroll, the escalation of God's message is clearly visible in the progression from vision to consumption. In either case, the scroll in Revelation 5 provides information about how to interpret the scroll in chapter 10. The scroll in chapter 5 is sealed with 7 seals, which are opened one by one, but the contents of the scroll are apparently not revealed to the audience. The opening of the seals prepares readers for what the scroll contains. But the text says that no one is able to open the scroll or to look into it. And then most definitely we need to put a point. Be too long here. Please note where we are. Let's see here. What's very interesting, so I lost. Yes, short summary here of what we read. We have a hint already on page 102. After the inclusion from John of Patmos, that we just read under that paragraph, the third paragraph, go down. In a text rich with somatic imagery, the language of taste in the episode is a rhetorical tool that expresses a specific meaning. So somatic imagery and the language of taste is a rhetorical tool that expresses a specific meaning. We can also compare meaning to movement here, as we mentioned before. The collapse of an idle picture or an idle idea, or what comes before a speech act. Will sort of collapse thanks to somatic context. Page 104 is almost too good to be true. On the top, someone called Maggie Kilgore. Interesting. As Maggie Kilgore has demonstrated, the lens of ingestion exposes the metaphor of opposition between what is inside the body and what is outside of it. An opposition that itself dissolves as soon as the external object is made internal to the body. Well, here we have both the Klein bottle logic we mentioned so many times before from Stephen M. Rosin and Merleau-Ponty. It's also what we learned from how space is composed. Next time I will bring out my Klein bottle to show this goes to, we need not, I don't recommend to take it now, since we are a little lack of time, but thank you. But it shows that space itself is both inside and outside at the same time. And as we read further, in other words, ingestion transforms a foreign object into the component of the body of the one who has ingested it. It will be internalized as well as externalized. And further down the page, just 6 or 7 lines down here, sensory analysis has become an increasingly prominent methodological tool, especially in fields such as anthropology, where scholars such as David House have recognized the importance of non-visual, non-oral sensory experience in Western and non-Western cultures alike. And I may add to this the most important sense, the one that makes for meaning, and that is called proprioception, the self-sensing feature. And I'd say both in the previous article by MEREDITH about libation, communion, touching, moving, that is most closely connected to meaning and doing. Proprioception is also the sensory organ of doing. We can here compare to kinesthesia and balance. Sensory and somatic imagery, we read further down at the very end of this paragraph, of the same paragraph. Sensory and somatic imagery is woven into Revelation's message in a way that makes it impossible to understand the text without investigating the historical and rhetorical meaning behind the imagery. And I think she's pointing with these words also to the sensory connection, the proprioception, the olfaction, the taste of the tongue, and the actual muscular sense of eating the scroll. At the end of this page, many scholars agree that this recommissioning hinges on this little episode of the scroll. The ingestion of the little scroll marks a shift in the content of the book as a whole. This has great importance in the understanding. Without taking in the scroll, eating it, digesting it, ingesting it, it cannot be internalized. And that, I think it's pretty apt to compare to doing is understanding the words in Revelation. The act make the words become the words of God. We are at page 105. There is a little quote from Revelation 5:2-3. And it's a description of the scroll. And I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within, and on the back sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" I'd say the scroll is pretty well comparable to the Möbius strip. It is also a closed scroll. It is sealed, but it will open up if we enter in it. We start walking the surface of it. I think it's 2 things that are participatory here in the text so far, which makes it mighty interesting. One is the Klein bottle. Inner and outer comes together in the ingestion of the scroll. It is also what we talked earlier with Paul Johnston, rethinking the inner. This fixation of closing off the inner from the outer is causing the standstill, according to Johnston, Schulte, and Eugene Fischer, and many more of Wittgenstein's interlocutor. And here later in the read, we also have the Möbius strip. The Möbius strip, we know, is what the universe shows to be eternity, permanence, infinity. That is infinity. And that is needed to the word infinity and permanence and immortality to have its meaning. Little comment from Kalle here. We need to, well, we should, if we can, record another one. So.
In the previous paper by MEREDITH, I compared the the cup and the bottle imagery in her libation paper to a Klein bottle. And here you made an excellent comparison between the scroll and maybe the strip. I really love it. But we need to, so to say, deepen this comparison by at another occasion. I will only take up here on something else on page 4. Like this is a more technical issue, but still important. Argument about the construction of the little scroll in chapter 10 supports the current consensus that the recommissioning in chapter 10, verse 11, where John is told to prophesy again, demarcates a new section of the entire book of Revelation.
Ah, yes, indeed.
So basically, to inform to the readers who are not so the Bible has not studied the history of the Bible, we know that chapter divisions, they are relatively recent, they are from medieval times. And let me see, here is the key name. Archbishop Stephen Langton and Cardinal Hugo de Santo Caro developed a different So they made the chapter divisions, Langton or modern chapter division based. So he's the inventor of the chapter divisions. So we don't find them in the scrolls from antiquity. There were no divisions in chapters. So this what we have in modern Bibles, 10, 11, or chapter 10, what is chapter 10 is completely arbitrary. Of course, Bishop Langton uses his common sense, but who knows if it's true. We could 10, 11, we could see, so it begins here, you see here. So the chapter would, section would end here. But split as money in your mouth. So the new section should begin. No, it should end here, I think. I don't know why does. No, it should end actually here after this phrase. So that's a natural division.
It should end. Then they said to me, "You must prophesy again about many peoples and nations and languages and kings." Indeed.
We could one last thing. Let me look up this Maggie, whom you mentioned in the paper. The Collar who made this. Let me see, is this the same Maggie at the Department of English? So to remind the audience, it was here, I think it was page. Let me see, Maggie. Here, it was about this opposition between what's inside the body and what is outside, an opposition that itself dissolves as soon as the external object is made internal to the body. So this Gilgur, and this Maggie Gilgur teaches English. Renaissance European literature, classical literature, and what has he published? About Milton's poetical thoughts.
Paradise Lost. Political, poetical thought. Very interesting, very interesting. I think I'm afraid we have to keep it a bit short to be able to hopefully record something more here with a little break.
Yes, okay. So thank you, Hans.
Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl, for participating. And very interesting, both as you mentioned last time with the Klein bottle, and here we also have the Möbius strip. And we know, of course, two Möbius strips, both are eternity, but one chirally left and one chirally right makes up a Klein bottle. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very nice day, morning, afternoon, or evening. And until next, bye.